Interesting. There it goes. So I guess I do have that black screen. It is projecting. My screen is black. It's not necessarily good. This may be one of those days. What? I don't know. I never paid any attention, so. Why is it frozen? That we don't need to do temp tables and functions today? Let's give it like a couple minutes. Sometimes these will unfreeze in time. I think I was impatient and I tried to maximize while it was loading. What? I already logged in. I was starting SQL Server. And as it was loading, I tried to maximize, and somehow that overloaded. So I'm hoping that it catches up. Yeah, I can hear the hard drive struggling. I really think the slow thing on these has to be the hard drive, because they have plenty of RAM. They have a fairly powerful i7. Is it just dead? That would be unpleasant. Yeah, I may have to. Don't want to, but maybe I will. All right, let's try it one more time. If this fails, I have one other VM, the one that I use for 172. It has the same stuff on it. But I'm not sure it has natural alt, but I'm not using that for example. Yeah. Oh, wow. What? Yeah, I know. Come on. Class is going to be over before I get this up and running. Hey, so there we go. That's a beginning. Yeah. I think I would rather they had bought desktops instead of these. All right, so I'm going to maximize now. So this, the videotape, the video is videoing the failure of the first one. So we'll try to bring up SQL Server. I don't know why I always refer to it as videotape. Tape has not been around much for a while. Even movies aren't made on tape. They do some backups. Some computer backups still run on tape. I'm not entirely sure why. It is fairly fast and you can get fairly high volumes of stuff on it, but it's all sequential. You have to, you can't randomly access. Yeah, it might be. It may be just too that they just had to take backups for so long and just don't want to change. There are people still using Unix mainframes from the 70s because they don't want to change, because they put millions of dollars into them and they don't want to put millions into a new system. All right, I think we may be ready. Yeah. I'm going to bring up the magnifier, partially because we're going to look at some things. So this is going to be temp tables and functions. Not that the two have anything to do with each other, they're just two topics that are in there. And they're not, the temp tables in particular is not a hard topic. So you guys already created tables. I'm going to make just, so I'm going to use Community Assist. And then we will just create a temp table. Create table, and I'm going to put a pound sign in front of this, and I'll call it temp person. And I'm just going to put let's do like the person last name, and we'll do in bar car 255, person first name in bar car 255, and we'll put in the email. And I'm not bothering with the primary key or anything. You could if you wanted. So I'm going to create this temp table. And I'm going to access it, and then I'm going to just insert into temp person, and I think I need the hash still. And we'll do person last name. I'm not sure if I need to name them, but I will. Person first name. Person email. And I'm just going to insert, do the select, those same fields. From person. Okay. So if we run this, I did run temp person, right? Yeah, so it did 130 rows affected. And if I do select star from temp person, I should be able to see all those people. Okay, so they're all there. Now, the thing about this temp table, and one of the reasons why I zoomed, is if you look under databases, community assist, there aren't going to be any tables here called temp person. Right, so if we go down here, there's no temp person. Where you would find it is in the system databases. If I go into the temp DB and I look at temporary tables in the temp table, notice that there's a temp person there. This table will exist as long as I am in this session. Does that make sense? As soon as I leave this session, it goes away. Now, if I open a new query window, so I want a new query. Where is my new? There it is. And if I look here and try to do select star from temp person, I will get an error. Right, the table doesn't exist here, but it does exist in the other session. Right, so a temp table is there only for this kind of temp table is only there for the duration of this session, for the context of this one session. If I were to close this window and come back, it would be gone. And if I go to another window, which is another thread, another context, it will be gone. Right, it's only here in this context that the temp table exists. What would you use temp table for? They're often good for like intermediate steps of calculations. Right, rather than doing a really complicated calculation, you might do some steps. And temp tables are good for that, and you don't need to keep them permanently. You just need to do them for some of the intermediate kinds of things. So that's one kind of temp. It's over here, right, as I said, and as soon as if I were to close this down and come back, it would be gone. In fact, if I go over here, let's see, if I go to the other thing, click here, if I refresh over here, it should go away. Right, because it doesn't exist in this context. It does in this one, but not in the other. You might notice they have different IDs, 56 and 52. Does that make sense? So there's another kind of temp table, and I'm just going to do select. Well, so let's create a table, something easy. I'm going to call it temp employee. You don't have to call temp tables temp, by the way.
But you just have to put the hashtag.
The hashtags are what make it a temporary table. I didn't say that, but yes, good point. A single hash means that it's a temp table within just the one process. Double pound signs, the double hash signs, mean that it is a global temporary table. What that means is that every current session can see it, right? So it crosses session. It still has no permanence. Once all those sessions are down, it's gone. But you can see it from other things. So I'm just going to, we'll go down to.
For instance, if we were to have done a double hash for the last one and we opened a new query, we would have been able to see it.
You would have been able to see it. I just pulled the things in here. I'll give them all types. Int, I think that was just date and employee salary. Did I do money? I did, so let's do money. Okay, so I'll make this temp table. And then I'll just populate it from employee, insert into temp employee. And I'll drag the columns again. I'll break that up so it's on screen though. And then I'm just going to select, I don't know if it'll let me do like select star from employee. Will that work? You guys tried that? I always name them out, but let's see if that works. That worked because I have all the fields there. You can't do this if you don't have every field. So I can do select star from temp employee, and it will be there. And if I go to the other process and do it also there, what? Should still be there. I mean, it is there. You what?
Go back to the other query.
Yeah.
In both cases, it was that. And then if we if I refresh the temp tables, whoa, what are these other temp tables? Anyway, you can see temp employee and temp person. I think some of those others were created in process when I was moving things around. But mostly you can see the ones here. And if I go to the other process, and refresh on temp tables, I still see temp person, which I shouldn't. Anyway, because it still won't let me do that here. So temp employee, if you wanted to share a temporary table with people that were currently working at the same time as you, but were logged in with different processes, the global temp table with the double hash sign is across all sessions that are open at the time, right? But if you close out those sessions, it goes away, right? It still doesn't have any permanence, but it has a little bit more permanence because one person could log out and another could still have it, and etc. But if once all the sessions are closed, it's gone. Does that make sense? So those are the two types of temp tables. And having said that, it's almost never that I use them, but I imagine they could be really useful for certain kinds of calculations and things. Also, it's possible that like in a stored procedure or something, you'd want to create something to temporarily store results before you move on. And you can query a temp table, so you could query the results of one calculation to get to do another calculation. So those are temp tables. As I said, they're really simple. They're fairly trivial. They're just like any other table, except whether you use a single hash mark or two hash marks. Okay. Are we ready to move on to functions? Any questions more on those? So when we talk about functions, these are things, there are hundreds of built-in functions, right? Literally hundreds. But you can add your own functions, and they're usually to do something in the database that you need done. Like if you were doing a sales database and wanted to calculate percentages of discount and things like that, you could do that with a function. You could build in a function to do that. I'm going to do a couple of functions. The first function I'm going to do is really going to be stupid. I mean, it's just to show you the syntax. We're just going to put in a number and cube it. All right, that's a really dumb function. But it'll show you sort of the syntax. And then we'll do a couple more complicated ones. What else do I want to say about functions? MySQL doesn't support building functions. You can build the stored procedures like we do. You can build triggers, which we'll do later, both of which we'll do later. MySQL, to write a function, you have to do it in C++. So I don't know why. Most other databases will let you do functions, but the syntax may vary a little between different databases. So I'm going to create function, and I'm going to, I usually prefix them with fx. You do not have to. I'm just going to call it cube, and it's going to take a parameter, so I'm just going to call it number, and it'll be of the type int. And I'm going to do as. So you basically, when you do a create function, you just create function, give it a name, and then you list all the parameters. And if there's more than one parameter, you separate them by commas. We'll do a couple that have more than one parameter. This just takes any number, right, as an integer. And then as, oh, I think I need to say returns int. It needs to say what kind of number it returns. And it's returns with an S that distinguishes it from the return at the end. Does that make sense? You know how in a function, if you're writing C# or some other code, Java, you have a return statement at the end of a function? This is just telling you what type it returns. So we'll have another return without an S at the end to say what the value that it returns. I'm going to do this in a more complex way than it needs to be. The begin, I think, is required, and the end. Begin and end function pretty much like curly braces. They begin and end a block. That makes sense. When we get into stored procedures, you will realize how annoying it is and how much better curly braces would have been. Because you have a begin, 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 you know, when you got blocks embedded in each other. And end, 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 you know, things like that. I'm going to indent. They don't. So I'm going to, this part you could probably skip, but I'm going to declare at cube as an int, and then I'm going to set at cube equals at number times at number. It's not case sensitive, but times at number. Okay. And then I'm going to return at cube. You could have done this in one line. You could have said return at number at times at number times at number. Right? But I wanted to show a couple of things. This is a parameter. You don't have to declare them. You have to give them a name and a type. This is an internal variable. Right? So if you're doing an internal variable, you have to declare it, and you have to give it a name and a type. All variables and parameters start with the @ sign. This sets the value for this variable. We have to use set. There are times when we use select. Select is usually if you're pulling the value from a table. So we'll look at that later. But it won't work with just saying at cube equals. You have to do set or select. At cube equals number times number times number with those variables. And then you have to return something. And notice again, this one doesn't have an S. So it's going to return the value in cube. Does that make sense? As I said, it's a dumb function. It's just there to show you the basic syntax. Generally, with the scalar function, you do have to have begin and end and the as after the returns. As I said, these can be really useful at times. I'll show you a couple in a moment. So I'm going to execute that. It just says that it was made successfully. The place where you would find this, so it wouldn't be in tables, it's under programmability. And notice there's a place for functions. And this is a scalar function. And there's 3 in there for so it's cube, get seed, and hash password. I made those 2. You got those when you downloaded the database. So but we just added cube. And if you click on that, a plus, it'll tell you there's a parameters folder, and you can see what parameters. It's taken an int, you know, as a number. So to use this, I'm just going to do select, and I'm just going to, you could pass something in from a table, but I'm just going to say select dbo.fxcube, and you do have to use the DBO. It takes an argument. Anybody have a number they want cubed?
5.
5. All right. As I'm just going to alias it. So I'm going to run that, and it returns 125, right? Did it work?
You have to put like
You have to do the DBO dot. Yeah, but that shouldn't really matter. Let's go fast. This one's real hot. Create FXQ. Oh, create function. Anyone else? They might not know that it exists. The IntelliSense or the SQL window is not always in sync with the other. You guys did okay? What? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. All right, so let's do a little bit more complicated function. Trying to remember what I did last time. Let's say that we wanted for the grant, not the grants, but for the donations, we wanted to be able to determine how much percent goes to the, you know, maintenance and how much goes to the actual charity. So what I'm going to do is we'll create another function. The goes are only necessary if you don't like red lines. They'll work without. But I'm going to do create a function. I'll call it fx. What do we want to name it? Percent what? So what we'll do is we'll have 2 things we're going to enter. We're going to enter the amount, and we're going to enter a percentage as a decimal. What? Yeah, it'll be from donations. Let's just call it donation percent. I'm not sure that's a good name for it, but Okay, so it's going to take two arguments. One will be, let's call it amount. And we'll just do it as money, although you could do it as decimal. And then the other we will do as decimal. I'll call it percentage. And we'll make that decimal. And we need like 3 digits, right? 3, 2 be enough. You guys remember how decimal works. 3 is the total number of digits, and 2 is how many will be to the right of the decimal place. This allows you to do 100% if you were really. So I'm going to do, actually allows you to do 900% so as the max. I'm going to say returns money as begin end. Why does it? Because they don't have a return yet. So I'll just, again, you don't necessarily have to do this. You can just assign the value to the return, but I'm going to make a variable. Declare at percent. I'm not sure. Naming things is always hard. And what I'm going to say is set percent at percent equals at amount times, and that should have an A, times at percentage. Now, a couple of things we could do in here that I should probably show you that you might not necessarily need to do. What if they enter a whole number? Actually, they really can't enter a whole number for a percentage with that decimal. Can't go above 9. But if they did, you could do an if in here. Do you want to change it so we can do an if? Again, it's just being, let's say 4. Well, let's say 5. That allows them that they could do 3, so they could do 100. Say they wanted 100%. You know, you could do that. So I'm going to, down here, I'm going to say, we're going to assume that it's not going to be a whole, that if they do a whole number, they didn't mean the whole number. So I'm going to say if, and actually I don't need the parentheses, if at percentage greater than 1, or do we want to do it as? Basically, this would allow 100% if you wanted to do it and no more. So if it's greater than 1, I'm going to do a begin, end. These are the curly braces for the if. And then I'm going to say at set at percentage equals at percentage divided by 100. So if it's greater than 1, we divide it by 100. So if they write in 20, we're assuming they mean 20% and not 2,000% or 200%. Well, this is, so we have a begin for the function, begin for the end, into the function, begin for the if, into the if. Okay. Let me comment this, actually. So this is begin function. end function, begin if. As I said, these are going to drive you nuts when we get into stored procedures because all these beginning and endings. For me, in my mind, curly braces make more sense than these words begin and end. Now you can, so you could like tab that in, tab, 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 tab. Does that make sense? It might make sense to indent these. Why does it? I still don't have a return. So what we want to do is we want to return at percent.
Capital P? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I mean, I suppose it makes sense to be consistent, which I'm not. So if we create that function, it says everything is okay. And let's use it. Questions on that? So this is a little bit more complicated. It might even be more complicated than it needs to be, but it lets me show a couple of things. One is the if, right? You can do if statements. The thing about functions, stored procedures, and triggers is it's a lot closer to what programming is, right? It's getting closer to Python or C# or something like that. There are loops too, although I rarely use the loops. Usually if you use a loop, you have to set a cursor and that gets complicated. But you can set loops, or the only kind of loop is a while loop. So let's use this function, and then we'll do just a couple more functions just to show you things that will apply to your assignment. So this is supposed to be a go. You're getting an error. Anyone else getting errors before we go? That function. After this line, doesn't it say return? No, that's no, it's percent. Oh, yeah. Which maybe I should have named it differently. These functions, once they're done, you never have to write it again. And if it's something you're going to do over and over again, it can really save you a lot of time. So I am going to select donation amount. And then I will do DBO dot what did I call it? FX donation percentage. Yes, donation percent. And I'm going to pass in donation amount. That's the amount. And then I'm going to give it just how much do you think should go to the charity itself?
15%.
15? 15 to the charity itself?
15%. 85%.
All right, so I'm thinking, so let's do 85 to the, And I'm going to do it as a whole number, so it should divide it by 100. So 85, and then I will alias this. Let me break this because it's going to be long. I'll alias this as charity. Don't need that there. And then I'll do the same function, but I'll do 15. And this one I'm going to put the dot in there. Oops. I guess I'll just say maintenance. Or maybe just overhead. Overhead's easier to spell. From donation. So if I run that, so this is the total donation amount. 133 would go to the charity, and 23 would go to overhead. That makes sense? And it worked. It whether it was a whole number or a decimal. I'm going to do one other thing with this, and then we'll look at a couple other little variations. Did it work for you guys? So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to show you that you can use it in the context of other functions too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sum donation amount. And I will do sum for the function. We're going to sum the result of the function. And I'm going to do the same here. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding a sum to all of this. And what that would do is instead of giving me a row, each row, it'll give me the totals. Although I didn't name this one. It's not a lot of money, but we don't have a lot of. Right, so you can use these functions just the way you would any other function once you've now built them. And you could add the year if you want, and you could, group by, and you could also format these to look like dollars if you wanted. It starts to get really complicated when you do that, but you can. I think I read somewhere you can nest up to 255 functions. Only an insane person would do that. But you could do the format function outside of this. Questions on that? Did it work? That's fine. It's that kind of day. I'm going to, because one of the things that I have you do as an assignment is to concatenate an email from when you insert somebody brand new, you take their first name, dot, last name, at, and then it'll be metroalt.com. So basically everybody that's a new person gets an email automatically. So I want to show you a function that concatenates something. It's not hard, but it'll be less complex. And then I'm trying to think. That might be all I really need to show. I'll look at the assignment, see if there's anything else. So I'm going to do, let's, I guess, a go. Create function. I'm going to call it fx address. And what I'm going to do is concatenate the pieces of the address together. So it's going to take, like, I think I might leave the apartment out. At street, I guess I could, let's do add apartment. I don't remember what I did for all of these. At street. What was it? At city. This is actually more complicated than what I'm going to have you do. At state. And this one I'm just going to do in car 2. Hopefully that'll work. It might complain because I think I did stupidly did 255 on the community assist. Person address. Columns. Yeah, I did 255 on the state. So it might complain that it's going into something too small. Guess I'll just do that. And then the zip. Okay, so we're taking in a lot of variables. I'm going to say it returns in varchar 255. Something I want to say, if you don't give, when you do a returns, if you don't give it a length and a type, I mean, if you give it a type but don't give it a length, it assumes its length is 0. It doesn't complain, but it returns nothing. Yeah. Yes, there should be. Thank you. I was wondering why that was underlined. Good eye. Okay, and then we do as. And then I'm going to do begin. And I usually do the end right away, just like I do curly braces, just so I don't forget them. This is because it doesn't have a return statement yet. So one of the things I am going to do, the address could be null, right? So not sure how this will work. If not if the address is null, but if the apartment is null. So let's do a begin end for that. I also think I want to create a variable. Well, it needs to be in the begin. And I'll just call it at address in varchar 255. So if apartment is null, then I'm going to say at address, and I have to say set. And it's basically just going to be at street. Do they do a plus? You don't put a comma between street and city, do you? at city plus why doesn't it like that? Well, yeah, it's, oh, because I need single quotes. All right, plus state and then basically plus an empty space plus at zip. Does that make sense? So we're just going to make that string there. And then otherwise, and so I'm going to do an else here. And I'll do a begin end for the else. I don't think there's anything that's going to be null when you do it for Metro Alt, so you don't have to do an if like this. I'm going to set at, actually what I'm going to do is copy this. And then I'm just going to add up front at apartment plus and then plus. I'm going to break that. What? Oh, it's double quotes again. And then I'm just going to return at address. So let me kind of slip this down. Can I get this whole thing on there? Maybe if I pull that way down. And again, this is more complicated than yours would have to be because you're not going to deal with a null. And we could have just left it, you know, just done a null. This doesn't necessarily deal with it if other things are null. But I do know that address is definitely nullable. I mean, yeah, apartment. So we basically just said if apartment is null, then just do an address without it. And if it's there, then include it. That's basically what that means. Does that make sense? The painful part of this is the concatenating in the spaces and the punctuation. Let's see if this works in a second. And then I'm trying to think of what else I have for you. It might be fine. That might be enough. So I'm going to run it. Things that'll screw you up when you're doing these are the begin and ends. Returns versus return. And they do require the as after that. Basically, the function name, if you think of the as an alias thing, the function name is an alias for this calculation. So I am going to go, and then I'm going to select, I'm going to do person first name. Person last name. And then I'm going to do this dbo dot fx address. And I am going to, I think I can just go over here to person address and drag in the columns, get rid of the address key, And I'll break this up. Okay, so we didn't have person key either, so that could go away. So those are the fields. And then I say from person. And I'm going to inner join it on person address. P.person key equals PA.person key. And that should work. Does that make sense? We're passing all of these in here. And what we should come back with, oh, we need to alias this. I'm just going to call it address, which is a reserved word, of course. See how their address is now. And if they don't have an apartment, it just leaves it out. Just puts the street in the. I think I should have a comma in there after the address before the city. If you wanted to change this, how would you change it? Anybody have a clue? You'd have to alter the function. And then I'll go in here and add the comma there. And add the comma there. And then from alter, I just run the whole thing again, all the way down to the end. And then if I were to run this, it looks a little better with the comma after the. No, I didn't do it there. Thought I did it.
Do it in both the if clauses.
So I did after the apartment. I didn't do it after the street here. So let's do run it again. You can alter it as many times as you want. One of the things that happens sometimes when you alter it is it forgets you have the function for your IntelliSense, but it works still. That looks a little better, I think. Why would you do that? I don't know. If you were writing mailing labels, maybe. Does that make sense? So I just added some commas. That's all I did at the end. And the zip codes aren't showing up. Why? Did I not enter the zip? No, I did. Why are the zip codes not showing up? Did I not concatenate it in? I did. That's weird. Anybody have a theory as to why the zip code's not showing up? No, it's not actually. I have a theory. Yours are showing up? What did you do different than me? Did I put? I didn't put semicolons there, did I? Yeah, I had two, but I took them off. Yeah, which shouldn't matter. Well, let me change this to capital Z and see if that makes a difference. It shouldn't matter on the case. Because notice it doesn't matter on the return statement. Still don't have it. Yeah, I know, but that shouldn't matter. Should just ignore those. How many are not getting the zip code and how many are? You're not getting the zip. One of the things that I'm thinking it might be is I might be beyond the 255 character.
Yeah. I think it's the altering the week. But I just why is something longer to get that? So why did I did? You see, yeah, what I was talking over here is like, can't instead of alter table, just go in the object explorer, delete it. Hard, and then recreate it. See, that's. I get that. I got yours somewhere. I got yours somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's usually good that
Right. Which I don't see anything different in what I've got.
I might just make a quick function just browse this up. See what happens.
Well, I mean, it should. So I've got apartment address, city, state, zip. Do I have any difference? Apartment, state, city, state, zip. Apartment, street, city, state, zip. That's weird. I mean, I'm sure the zip would come through. I mean, it should come through. It's coming through on yours. It's weird that it's not.
Just try to do it. That's what's up. everything's stripped out. Just try to grab the zip.
Well, yeah, but that should work. So if I do, you mean just create one that does nothing but return the zip? No, it's not case sensitive. And when I look at theirs, they're not consistent on case.
Oh, return, just say return zipper.
What? But it won't return that. Not in varchar 255.
Just call it another name. Just call it zipper. Keep that as zip and then call it. Return zip equals.
So you'd have to do, before that, you'd have to say set at zip equals at. Still doesn't like it. Oh, because I haven't declared that zip. Still isn't seeing the at zip. Oh, I need one more paren, which is probably the problem before. Well, what I'll do, just select at, or select fx zip, and then I'm just going to do person address zip code. So just person address zip, what is it? In the table. Person address zip from person address. And I'm sure it'll just output the zip codes. Oh, DBO. See, it does the zip codes. I don't know why it would not do them up here. I'm not going to spend all day debugging it, though. I'll figure it out eventually. I see nothing different from what you did. All right, let's look at the assignment and see if there's something that I haven't covered. So, oops, I didn't want to kill that. I just wanted to let's go to Canvas. Whoa, that's huge. All right, log in already. Okay. So and assignments. Slowly getting there. So there's a temp table and then a global temp table. The function for the email. When I say 2-week pay check of an employee, basically, I'm not asking you. If you really feel ambitious, you can try to calculate what's actually there based on their work. I'm just thinking times 80, right? So you can, if you want to go in and figure out all the times they've been assigned, and some of them are assigned 24 hours a day, you know, and figure out how much pay they would get based on their hourly rate for all those hours, you can. But I am perfectly content, and all I was thinking of was to take their hourly rate and multiply it by 80, right? That's what I was thinking of. I wasn't thinking of doing the harder one. But if you feel really ambitious, what I would do is do the easy one, and then if you feel ambitious, go and do the other one, right? Try to do that, because it's way more complicated. And then also the hourly rate. This is a really stupid calculation, but basically what I'm doing is you go in, like if you went in for a driver, it's a new driver, you would take the highest pay for the highest paid driver and the lowest paid driver and take the difference, which would put them right in the middle, right? So basically that's how you calculate what their new pay will be, which is a stupid way to calculate pay. But it's just, again, to do another little function. Does that make sense? Sort of. So it's the difference between the maximum and the minimum pay. And as I said, yes, this is very arbitrary. It's not how anyone would assign pay. But it gives you something to calculate a function on. Do you guys need any more examples of functions to do those? Because you can go on forever making functions. They're kind of fun to make. Where they're really useful, as I said, is when if you have calculations that you need to do over and over and over again in a database, they can be really useful. Just make it and you only have to do it once. In community assist, another one might be the difference between the amount that they ask for versus the amount that they're granted. All right, comparing those could be an interesting function, which is something you can do. The next stage after this, but Thursday will definitely be an open lab. The stage after this is where we start talking about stored procedures, which are a little bit more complex. I think the last thing I will do, and let's zoom up for this, just to show you, it's not something you need to do. Under the functions, as I said, there were a couple of them, like hash password. So I'm going to script function as create to a new query window. So this is how I hash passwords. Basically, it takes in a seed, which is just a random number. The other function in here is get the seed, which is get a random number. And then this takes whatever their plain password. It returns var binary because that's just the type for the hash. I declare a variable that sets a hash at hash as an invar. This is the password to hash, which is the concatenated password and the seed. The reason they concatenate a random number with it is to prevent dictionary attacks. So if they used a real word, the dictionary attack is literally it goes through a dictionary and hashes the words, and then sees if any of those words match the hash of password. It's just it's not something somebody's manually doing. They just set up a rhythm, goes through, literally hashes a word in the dictionary, goes out and checks to see if it has any hits, matching the password, etc. So if you put a random number in it, dictionary attacks don't work. This is declared something to store the hash. SQL Server has a built-in function called hash bytes, which does hash things. And I'm using the SHA-2 512, so it's a 512-bit hash. It's one of the more current ones. One of the things you have to be aware of if you're ever hashing, and which we'll look more at this at security, is that a lot of the earlier, older hashes have been broken, which means a hashed password or a hashed phrase should never be able to be converted back to characters, regular characters. Encryption does that. Encryption allows you to encrypt something and decrypt it. A hash is a one-way thing. But if you understand the numeric algorithm they use to hash it, you can in fact decrypt it. And a lot of the earlier ones are broken. But this turns it out. This is a 512-bit hash, and it returns it. So it's actually pretty. If we do, just to use this, select, and I'm just going to fx dbo fx hash password. And the first argument is the seed, right? So I'm just going to do a random number. And the second argument, I'll just do password. Okay. And if I run that, it creates a hash, right? 512-bit hash. And you shouldn't be able to break that too easily. For those in the 172, this is why I have a stored procedure to log into, because you have to take the username, pull the seed out, hash it with their plain text, combine it with their plain text password, hash it, and see if the hashes match. It's a lot of work. They claim that's the best practice, but it's a lot of work. So I just wanted to show you. This is a function doing something semi-serious. It's better to hash it on the database side too, where you can control the string sizes. I've done it in C# before, because you can do this in C#. The trouble is that the string sizes vary a bit, and if the string is a little bit different, the hashes won't match, even though it's the same password. If there's a space at the end, or it'll screw you up. So it's better to hash them all on the database side. Just use this. The seed one, I'm just going to right-click, script function as create to new query window. Actually, I changed this, but I didn't change it here. I couldn't get the random to work. I did get it to work, though, later. I think the newer version of this has the random function. This one, what it does is it's just going through and stealing bits from the clock and then concatenating them to get the seed. So it just goes through the time and breaks the time up into hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and then concatenates it all, which is not the best way to do that, actually. But I have a new one that actually uses the random number function. Of course, underneath the random number function is just doing something similar, but with a lot more calculations. All right, so I will post this one. Okay, not that one. I think we're 56. Yeah, okay, I'll post this one. Open lab on Thursday. We'll start stored procedures on Tuesday. Oh, yeah, Tuesday. We're not affected by the holiday next week. So. In this class. Yeah.